So we have a good panel on JSRs here today. The panelists include Ian Randall, who is the head of learning and accountability at Grow Africa in the United Kingdom. And Ian has done a lot of work on both the private sector engagement in the joint sector review process and also on the reporting out of private sector commitments and actions. We have Fatma Sewu, who is the ECOWAP CADAP M&E officer from ECOWAS, Nigeria. And if you've been following the media, there's been a lot of attention to the Nigeria. I don't know if you're involved in the Nigeria joint sector review. And also ECOWAS is going to be hosting the first ever regional joint sector review, I believe, with dates to be determined in November. We have Buba Khan from Africa. He's the African Advocacy Officer at ActionAid International, based in the Gambia. Now, Buba and ActionAid have a history of involvement in advocacy on behalf of agricultural expenditures per the Maputo agreements. But Buba has also been directly involved in some of this JSR assessment, particularly in Mozambique. We have Maurice Lorca Ngassan, who is the CADAP Pillar 4 Advisor for Rural Economy and Agriculture at the AUC, based here in Addis Ababa. And as you can guess from his title, Maurice is involved in all aspects of this JSR and mutual accountability from the AUC point of view. And then we have Mr. Dludlu, who's the director of Ultersol in Swaziland. So if I'm correct, Ultersol is a strategic consulting firm, and previously you've done work on introducing data on stakeholder priorities that's used in government budget decision making, and more recently you've been involved with the ReSAKSS South Africa in support of the assessments of the JSR processes. So it's a really good panel, and we've got some really good expertise here. So let me tap directly into that expertise. And Ian, I'm going to start with you. There you are, right next to me. And the question that I have for you is that CADAP and the New Alliance have put a lot of emphasis on the role that the private sector has to play in helping achieve country progress. In the area of review and dialogue, what has been the experience in terms of the level and quality of participation of the private sector, and what needs to happen to improve the level and quality?
Okay, thank you. So I think if I go back to I think it was about 2011, there was a particular moment in CADAP. There'd been a lot of progress on developing investment plans in each country, but there was a strong sense that we were missing a big piece of the puzzle. The private sector were not joining in the conversation. They were just not at any of the events. We didn't have those relationships. We didn't know how to orient towards them. And it's because they're a different kind of animal. I think it's one of the metaphors that I think of is, just as the flowers will orient themselves towards the sun, from which they get their energy, private sector will always orient itself towards the activities, the spaces in which it's generating value. It's sort of fundamentally in its DNA, otherwise another company will outperform it, or another farmer indeed. So into that there's a puzzle. How do you create the spaces where any individual companies or those collections of companies come in and see enough value in these spaces to really join in as a partner, willing to engage in mutual accountability to drive the agricultural transformation. And it was from that Grow Africa was born, a partnership between the AUC, NEPAD, and the World Economic Forum, bringing in the World Economic Forum's kind of understanding and network with the private sector. And equally in that moment, sort of at a similar time, the New Alliance was formed, which sought to bring much more concrete commitments from companies, governments, and donors around what they were going to commit to make sure that the promise of CADAP was delivered in each country. So into that, we then begin to get the building blocks for mutual accountability. Firstly, for the private sector, it's about getting those commitments. The commitments that are the foundation for then later on having those joint sector reviews, because you said, well, you promised something. And so it's been an amazing actually. We've now got $10 billion worth of commitments from, I think it's over 200 companies, looking at sort of about 300 different investments, and that's packaged up in what we call letters of intent. A letter of intent from a company to a government saying, in the context of the national agricultural agenda, this is what, as to our investment, this is the value we hope it's going to deliver in the country. So we've got this basis now, and they're also, it's important to emphasise, the majority of those are domestic companies making those commitments, and they're really varied. Everything from banks to seed companies to farms to processing facilities. So we've got those commitments now, and the next thing is to make sure they're reporting on progress so that they're providing information on how it's going for them. Now, again, persuading these companies that this is in their interest is difficult, but in the last year I think we got 56% of them actually responded. So you can take a point of view whether you think, well, that's fantastic, we've got an amazing amount of information, and some of those have disappeared off because they're not happening anymore, but others, we've got a good number that are participating, and the information we're getting is gold dust for kind of policy makers and decision makers in this space. So we're discovering that I think nearly $2 billion have been invested so far, $400 million worth of procurement, including most of that from smallholders, 2 million smallholders reached in various ways. But importantly, they're also willing to tell us what the issues are they're facing. And actually, they're quite hungry to tell us the issues that they're facing, because there are some fundamental blocks that can be unlocked by policy makers, whether it's around the way that land issues are managed, or tariffs are managed, or things getting stuck at customs. So we're getting that information in, and now the challenge is to bring them in to these dialogue platforms to have their voices heard. And I think the recent spate of joint sector reviews, the timing of the review process for this private sector commitments in the context of country reviews for the new alliance hasn't always entirely fitted perfectly into the joint sector reviews, but they've always been couched that this was a sort of linked to those joint sector reviews where the timing didn't work. And I think next year we can work better on that timing. But we've had those events. ReSAKSS have done an amazing job along with Africa Lead of convening these in the last month. And the Nigeria one sounds like it was a real buzz there, and generally, national interest, national media were there hearing about the progress and the issues. And we are seeing, in each case, it's been varied across countries, but we are finding ways of getting the private sector voice there. So a real positive step, right direction of travel, but I think there's much more we can do, and perhaps if I can my sort of final few comments is just to say where we can strengthen this, and really it's strengthening it in ways that mean the private sector are sensing the value here. They're being sold why this is really important for them to participate. Because if we get this genuine cross-sector dialogue, then we're much likely to make targeted policy-making decisions that are going to unlock really kind of inclusive and responsible investment. So firstly, they're asking for more focused conversations. They want to see action on the sort of recurring structural issues that can unlock investment, whether it's finance, infrastructure. And actually, it's the way to get that together is where we're finding groups of companies that are facing a similar issue. And so we're not asking them to all turn up to all events, but perhaps, like at the moment, we're talking to ECOWAS because there seems a strong interest from companies in realizing the possibility of massively increasing rice production in West Africa. It's the opportunity of import substitution is huge, but the tariffs and the various policy arrangements are not quite right yet. So they want to have that conversation. If it's done in a structured way, they're more likely to turn up and participate, and actually then unlock huge amounts of investment potentially. So we're working with ECOWAS, Africa Rice to try and convene some of that and get some commitments out of it. And then that also, the other thing they're asking for is that's more ongoing. So it's not just once a year. They feel like the ongoing relationship, and the JSR is the culmination of that. So their voices are continuing to be heard. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Ian.